heartfelt intention to be an open and structured channel for unconditional love in the unique way that is precious and meant for this projection of the divine that is Rose. And today I am excited to be talking about the idea of creating narrative in our lives intentionally. So the idea of consciously writing our stories and experiences, and how this entangles with what we can do when we are creating narrative in an unconscious way, which is, I'll say here, creating drama. So on the surface of it, narrative and drama and story, these all have similar meanings. And here I'm going to be using narrative and story to imply creating with an increasing sense of self-awareness, and using drama to refer to creating from a place of unconsciousness. So that's not to hop on any kind of drama hating train in general. I myself really enjoy acting, and certainly there's drama that is positive and beautiful and yada yada, all the things. And here, just so you know, when you're listening, I will be using that term drama or creating drama to be referring to the unintentional experiences that we create when we are creating from a place of a lack of self-awareness. And then, likewise, how we can become more self-aware in order to create in a way that is actually conducive to what we want. So that creative process is largely fueled by passion, a desire for newness, a desire for, or an accepting of, an embracing of change, zest, stimulation, spice, spontaneity, the phrase, variety is the spice of life, etc. All of these things feel very stimulating, exciting to human beings. We enjoy being stimulated, which is not to say that is all there is here, and those things are things that we innately enjoy, experiencing these bodies and all that come with them, sensations, emotions. We have the ability to channel those desires in ways that are conducive to getting what we want, and in ways that are not conducive to getting what we want. So we might generally parse that out as creating with an empowered mentality versus creating with a victimhood mentality. And the way that looks often is where we can ask the question, where are we projecting that energy? Are we projecting it onto things that are in our control, or are we projecting it onto things that are outside of our control? So the idea of creating narrative in a conscious way, to me, starts with recognizing that I am the main character of my story, of my life. And likewise, you're the main character of your life, and he's the main character of his life, and etc., etc. Our experience with ourselves is the most direct experience that we can ever have. We will never be able to experience life through another. It doesn't matter how close we get to them. We each are gifted with a unique experience. We gift ourselves with a unique experience that is our most direct experience with our ability to create. So making others so oftentimes I'll notice that I'm still doing this, right? And often a lot of people do this. Like, we make other people the main characters of our story. We notice that we are wanting something, and we have thoughts come in like, oh, how's that going to affect this person? What are they going to think of me? And that's totally okay. Those thoughts are welcome. And when we allow another person's experience of our story to inhibit our creation of our story, it is us projecting a deep level of attention and love away from the self and onto others, which is, in my experience, self-negligent. And actually, it's not only, as per the usual, it's not only negligent in a way, I tried to stay away from the terms negative and positive, and just for ease, I'll use it here. It's not only negative for us, but it's also negative for the other person, because it deprives them of the space to learn to harness their own ability to create for themselves from themselves. If someone is taught to rely on another person to dictate their personal narrative, their story, then they don't, it's not as easily accessible. They're not going to be as motivated to create their own story, to live a life that they want to live. So it's a way that a lot of us find like safety and excuses, really essentially, for not stepping into our power, is by making other people the main characters in our story. And it's really a futile effort, because, as I said, we are each inevitably the most direct experience that we have. Our firsthand experience is the most direct experience we have with being human, that we have with creating. I was in a play earlier this year, and one of my fellow actors posed a question to the cast as we were sitting in the green room getting ready for the show one night, and he said, I have an exercise for y'all, a fun exercise. Who is the most important person in this show? And it was a really interesting question, especially for that show, because it was what's called an ensemble cast. So there were 6 of us in the cast, and there was no like lead and then supporting roles. Everyone had about the same amount of time on stage. We were all sharing the story. We were all equal members, so to speak, in the story. And so this actor, he said, who's the most important person in the show? And he wanted to hear an answer from each of us. And so it was quiet for a minute, and then I decided to stick my neck out, and I said, okay, I'll give it a go. It's Candy. That was my character in the show. So I was like, I'm the most important person in the show. And one by one, all of the other cast members gave the same answer for their situation. I'm the most important character in the show. I'm the most important person, etc. And this other actor who had posed the question, validated the consensus that we had come to, was that for each of our characters, we were the most important people in the show. And that was what gave the show integrity and a sense of being genuine, was that we were all playing our parts in a way that made each of us the center of our experience. And I would say that same principle applies in the greater narrative that is daily human life. And it feels counterintuitive, right? Because it's easy to pin ideas like, oh, well, that's selfish, and selfishness is bad, and selfishness turns us away from whatever, loving other people, or lots of ideas that we have around what the results are, what the consequences are from us loving ourselves more fully. And what I continue to post on this podcast, what I continue to practice and feel convicted of and see work in my life and in the lives of many people around me, is that actually when we focus on getting in touch with a genuine sense of who we are and loving who that is, it better equips us to love others, to create in a way that has integrity, to communicate with a wider variety of people, to show up better, in conversation when people are expressing emotional energy, a whole variety of things that getting in touch with ourselves in a real way helps expand in our relationships with other people, because ultimately we are, because of that firsthand experience, that direct connection that we have only with ourselves, that is first and foremost the most fruitful place for us to learn, and will permeate further than learning in any other less direct way. Okay, so narrative, going back to just kind of the idea of stories, and human beings love stories, like for as long as, history, right, is a story, right, his story, right, it's the thing, right, humans love to tell narrative, to tell story. So when I'm thinking about story, like what comes to mind, one of the first things that comes to mind is the rather cliche story arc that you might have also learned about in whatever elementary, middle school English class, that says that stories happen with like an opening, a rising action, a climax, a falling action, and a conclusion. And it's continued to become more and more interesting to me to notice that narrative unfolding in movies that I'll watch, in books that I'll read, and to appreciate how, in many ways, that is not actually how life works. It's nice to... It's simple. It's nice to watch a movie and have that pre-programmed idea of how it'll be and be able to trust that the story will unfold that way. Like, oh, I'm gonna be given some context for what's happening. It's gonna, there's gonna be building action and things are gonna happen, and then there's gonna be a problem, and then it's gonna reach a pinnacle point of the problem, and then someone's gonna come in and solve it, and then the fallout from that is gonna happen, and then things are gonna boil down and happily ever after, right? And anyone who has lived much life realizes that that's not actually how life works, at least not in a broader sense. A better alternative, I would suggest, for that same idea, but a more expansive way of looking at human narrative. I'm going to pause here and drink some water. Liquid. Is Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, which is a much more expanded version of narrative, of the story arc that tends to play out in human life, whether at the individual level, including the individual level of the mind, in a faster way, in a way that's more frequent, including in a slower way, over the course of one's lifetime, and including in a collective way, both small groups and a larger whole collective. If you're not familiar with the hero's journey concept, I encourage you to delve into it. If it strikes your fancy, it's super interesting. I'll call out the, let's say 17 steps in it, just to give an example of this like broader story arc. So the first one is the call to adventure. The hero is called to adventure. The second one is the refusal of the call. So the hero like balks. you know, for whatever reason, there's fear. Yeah, the hero refuses the call. Supernatural aid comes in is the third step. So something, greater than the hero inspires the hero to answer the call. And then is the fourth step is the crossing of the first threshold. So this is stepping into the initiation stage, where the hero starts to really be in the fire and the transformative part of the journey. There's the belly of the whale step, which is like darkness. There's the road of trials, so more darkness. This step meeting with the goddess, so encountering some kind of divine experience that usually in the theory the hero is I've seen a lot of the heroes like needing to earn the approval of the goddess, right? So some sense of becoming worthier, like and maybe we could even just say like finding self-worth in order to continue on the journey. This self-worth then shifts into temptation for the hero to leave the journey. And then there's another like receiving help stage from experiencing atonement, forgiveness with father is usually the way that the theory words it, although this could also look like the superego, the parent figures, the parent figures in the subconscious mind. And that's kind of like the low point of this circular arc, and then going back up. There's let's see, I'm not even sure how to say this fucking word, which is a rarity for me. Apotheosis. I can say that word. That's not that hard. Oh, it's another word for climax. That's awesome. I may have more uses for that term, apotheosis. And then so there's the climax, the overcoming, and then the next step is the ultimate boon. So it's like the accomplishment stage, like what was set out to do has been done. And then the final of the three stages of this theory is the return. So at first the hero doesn't want to return. There's the refusal of the return, and then there's the traversing back to where the hero came from. And then there's the hero yet again receiving help from someone else in order to help them then cross the threshold, cross back over the threshold to return. And with this, the hero is now master of both worlds, the world that the hero was originally in and the world that the hero moved through, in order to now come back and be able to bring the fruits of that learning to one's community. And that brings the hero more expansive freedom. That's the last step, is freedom to live. So that's just an example of a somewhat more realistic, from my perspective, story arc beyond just the cliche opening, rising action, climax, falling action, closure. And human existence is way more complex than 17 steps that go in a circle and always happen in that order. And it's not that simple. So I would say, in a sense, all of these steps at least have the potential to be happening all at once. And of course, as humans, we're each in our own space, our own stage, our own phase. So I may be caught up in going through my initiation phases, whereas those people over there, or the people next to me that I'm hanging out with, maybe haven't even crossed the threshold, the first threshold. So there's there's a lot of, it's a co-creative experience that we're having as humans as well. A lot to be aware of as we're learning to create more consciously. And so it's understandable, noting that complexity, that as we start consciously creating our own narrative, and as I like to look at it, writing a script for our lives and discerning what set and setting we want to have for our lives and who we want the other characters to be, what we want them to be like, etc., etc. It's understandable that we start to notice more that, oh, the other people in my life may or may not be filling the roles that I'd like to cast them in, per se. So this becomes a process of honoring, oh, right, they're also creating their own narrative. We're co-creating here. This is an interdependent process, and sometimes that can look like creating a new narrative together that is alchemized in a way that is more fulfilling for both people. Sometimes it's a separating and walking separate paths so that both people have more freedom to create the narrative that they desire. I read this really beautiful quote earlier today. I was at a friend's vegan juice bar in St. Charles, Missouri. Shout out to Rootbound. And there are lots of beautiful things to read there. And I read a quote that says, it's by Rosa Luxemburg. I have no idea who that is. Shout out to Rosa Luxemburg, whoever you are. Thank you for your beautiful words. Quote, "Those who do not move do not notice their chains." Wow. What powerful words. What powerful words. There is a dialectical experience that occurs as we are learning to move through, to break out of, to let go of our chains. What I mean by chains are the things that are uncomfortable to us, but that we've been taught to embrace as comfortable. So the limitations that we've accepted, that we've embraced, that we're putting on ourselves, often unconsciously, limiting beliefs, namely limiting beliefs, that which is limiting our perspective, which is then influencing our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. It is uncomfortable to let go of these chains because, well, one, because the chains have begun to feel comfortable. They feel kind of like a snug weighted blanket until you start to reach for what's outside of them. And then suddenly the chains are like, whoa, like that's constricting. Like, whoa, why can't I reach my arm out all the way to get to this thing that I want? Like, whoa, there's some restriction there. So there's first just the awareness of the chains being there when we weren't before. Then second, as we actually learn to dissolve the chains, break through them, let them fall off, there's a pain of their absence. Because suddenly we're left without these illusionary protections that we've grown to be attached to, whether that be, like other people's opinions or statuses, wealth, etc. Like so many things that we can seize onto as, this is giving me value. I am valuable to the extent that other people approve of what I'm doing. I am valuable to the extent that I am a stereotypically quote unquote good partner and a good parent. I am worthy to the extent that I am a productive member of society, however that looks. As we start to break out of those chains and to reframe and to reframe our ideas of where our worthiness comes from, and to start to become connected to the part of us that understands that we are inherently worthy. We are inherently worthy. We are inherently lovable. We are inherently loved. We are inherently loving. That what breathes us is something that is infinitely valuable. And as we begin to create from that place, instead of putting restrictions on ourselves, saying, well, I'm valuable and I love myself and all of that, and that only works as long as mom and dad approve of what I'm doing, or that only works as long as my friends agree with the decisions that I make, or that only works as long as I have a certain amount of money in the bank account, whatever. As we let go of whatever limiting perspectives are holding us back, that allows us to move more freely, to create more expansively, to get to know ourselves in a way that is more powerful, more free, more limitless, and ultimately more fulfilling. It feels fulfilling to feel powerful. It feels fulfilling to move through challenge in a way that feels like it was more honest than moving through challenge earlier in life. It feels fulfilling to give and receive deeper, more expansive love and connection. And we can only do that to the extent that we actually recognize, oh my gosh, I have the power to do that. You will always be limited by what you believe you can and can't do. Thank you to my 5th grade teacher who had that quote on her podium. There are 2 kinds of people in this world, people who say they can and people who say they can't, and they are both right. No one ever did anything that they believed they couldn't do, that they wholeheartedly believed they couldn't do. You may consciously, not believe you can do something and then you, accidentally do it per se. I'm going to suggest that that's because there was part of you that knew you could do it. The majority of our experience is subconscious, so take heart in that. That's not only like this adventure that's sometimes dark that, requires building all of these muscles of self-love and compassion and patience to dig through and understand the subconscious. It also points to a vast array of resources and information data that we've gathered over our entire human experience, our entire if you believe in past lives, or if you believe that you can inherit per se intuitive knowing through your mother, through the process of birth, and likewise down the generational line. So a lot of times people talk about generational trauma. There's also obviously post-traumatic stress disorder. There's also post-traumatic growth, and so I'm going to pose that there's also generational growth per se that can come from a place of hurt and healing. So not only am I receiving all of the fruits from unraveling and integrating the trauma that I've experienced in my own life personally, I also believe that I'm experiencing that I'm continuing to gather fruits from unraveling and integrating the trauma that my mother experienced, the trauma that her mother experienced. And that is empowering. It's infinitely empowering. It also gives me the ability to better offer that potential to other people, which can look an infinite number of ways, because that journey is so incredibly complex. Looking at my notes. Oh yeah, this is crucial. Okay, so creating in the most like pure, honest, humble way requires learning to feel and be okay with feeling foolish. Foolish, silly. It's if you're into astrology, this is the Aries energy, right? Like Aries is the Fool, Aries or tarot, right? The Fool is the first card of the tarot. And that's the first. This is not to say that we can't create without that energy. I will pose, though, that we're unable to create anything very original without that energy, because to birth something original requires that we be accepting to the possibility that it might be a total fucking flop. It might be a total flop. And that'll be okay, because you know what? I have enough trust in myself to understand that in producing whatever I produce, there will be, and holding space for it to be how it is, there will be an organic, alchemical refinement that occurs through and within me that shifts how my creation is in a way that brings me closer and it closer to truth. And so many of us, I know for a long time, like I had no idea how to play the fool. I had no idea how to be vulnerable and silly and okay enough with my mess to just show up and be like, blah, this is how I am. And some days, oh my gosh, some days it's still like, whoa, like, why are all these walls up? Where are they? What's going on? Okay. Notice. Be with. And the greatest gifts that I have received from this journey of self-actualization have all contributed to my ability to create in a way that is purely me. That's why this podcast is called Naturally Rosey. That's why my outlets that's why my Substack is called Naturally Rosey. You can follow me on Substack, by the way, and Spotify. Is because for me, what I find most fulfilling is actualizing the experience of being fully myself. In recognizing that I am a subjective microcosm of the macrocosmic whole. So it's not, I'm actualizing being myself in a way that is different than everything else. It's actually, I am learning to actualize myself in a way that embraces all the parts of who I can be. And because I inevitably have a subjective experience, that process of embracing all of the parts of myself integrates in a way that is very unique. And as it does in all people who undertake that kind of process. Drama, in the sense of unconscious passion, is created conversely when we are either not aware of our passions, of our desire for zest, of our changing nature. Everything changes all the time. That's the only constant. Or we are only partially aware of those things. And So instead of addressing it and being with it how it is, our desires, our passions, our vision, what we want, including our sexual energy, including our... I was just talking to a good friend last night, the night before, some night, who was expressing to me his challenges with being with his potential for violence. Totally a real thing. I've talked to many men and women who have expressed this unease with that potential that they feel in them, and I've talked to even more people who have expressed something to that effect, discomfort with the potential of their sexual energy, of their both sexual energy as an expressed through like sexuality, and also with their creative energy. This fear of what I might do if I let out all of those feelings. Oh! So common. That's why you notice a lot of people keep them stuffed in, or they come out in weird spurts that don't really make a whole lot of sense, but they're trying to come out because emotion is energy in motion and it likes to move. So this is a moment-to-moment practice of noticing, am I consciously choosing the creation of my story? Or am I playing out a drama that is programmed in me but isn't actually leading me towards my desire? So, for example, a drama in the sense of something that is illusionary, not true, that paints over, that corresponds with what I'm describing about emotions and passion, is this illusion that if we learn to be with and integrate our emotions and our passions, our creative powers, our sexuality, our physicality, our bodies, that they will become something that all kinds of things we can't control, that get away from us, that bring us, that move us further away from like our divine nature, all kinds of things. There's a lot of like fear around being with those intense parts of ourselves. And what I have seen is that fear, that resistance, actually maintains the level of control that those parts of us have over us in an unconscious way. And that the way to shift that energy into consciously creating our story in a way that we desire genuinely is to learn to be with those parts of ourselves, to open to them more fully, to be like the lotus, like the rose, and to unfurl ourselves to these many different ways of feeling stimulation and experiencing what it is to be human through our bodies, through our emotions. Because that's how we embody our nature, which I would say is divine innately. It doesn't do as nearly as much good. It's not nearly as fulfilling. It's not nearly as helpful to the rest of your human species out here to just like craft, to just change the mind to the extent that you can. The mind is always changing. That's its nature. But to just focus on crafting the mind to bend to the narrative that you want. This isn't an embodied experience. This isn't an enlightened experience. We end up stuffing all of the weight, all of the things that we're pushing away from the mind, because the mind feels threatened by them, feels that they're uncomfortable, and we end up stuffing all of that weight into the body, into the heart, and it suffocates us, it dims our light, it cuts off our creative powers. And personally, I didn't find that life to be nearly as fulfilling as the path I'm actively walking now, which is learning to embody my passion, learning to trust my feelings, learning to listen to my body, supporting other people doing that as well, and learning to know at a somatic level that it's not personal to me. Like, however anyone else is, like, that's their journey. I have very little ability to ever deeply, deeply, deeply understand why someone else does what they do. I can still empathize. I can still relate. I can still connect over shared experiences, certainly over shared emotions. And the level of subjectivity that we each experience, in my opinion, makes it essentially futile to really try to, to imagine that I can understand, I can know someone else's experience so well that I know what's best for them. And in this, I learned to take more responsibility for myself and to give other people more responsibility for themselves. And that is a really great ROI. A really great ROI. It's a beautiful thing. A beautiful thing to create more and more consciously. Not easy in many moments, and increasingly fulfilling, and increasingly simple too. It may not be easy, but it does become more and more simple as we learn to understand our own unique method behind the madness. With that, I will wrap it up. Check me out on all the social medias, not all of them. Let's see, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Naturally Rosey. Well, Facebook is just my name, Rose Leopold. If I don't respond yes to your friend request, please don't take that personally. I do like some layer of privacy in my life. Although for the most part, I'm extremely transparent and look forward to being more and more so. Shout out to Wayne B for sound engineering this episode. Check out his content at WayneB_314. Pie time! It's pie time. It's pie time! We get to creating some loving narrative instead of chaotic drama. Now, the irony is that as I've done this, as you might begin to do this, other people may interpret your loving narrative as chaotic drama. Ain't your problem. It's not. That's an opportunity for them to learn how to be with chaos, something that many people straight up avoid in life. They'd rather keep the peace, they'd rather maintain an illusion of perpetual cleanliness than recognize that, oh my gosh, life is messy sometimes. It's a lot easier, y'all, once you start learning to love the mess. Learning to appreciate it for what it is. Yeah, so here's episode 4. Super grateful. It's a beautiful life. In the pain and the pleasure. It's a beautiful life. May you all experience a life as beautiful as you are.